Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 3, Episode 14, The Pez Dispenser. Hello, everyone. I hope all of you out there are doing well. I hope your holiday season is going well. So far, so good for me. Just cranking out my Christmas shopping, mostly online. I did do a bunch at Target the other day, which felt really good. I wasn't planning on it. When do we ever plan our trips to Target and it goes as planned? Never. I had like 4 things on my list, but then I was like, let me just walk through. The kids are at school, so I'm by myself. I can do some solo shopping. Let me just see what they have over here. And yeah, it got out of control. Other than that, I got my booster last week. I am triple Pfi, meaning all 3 of my shots were Pfizer shots. And I just read yesterday that 3 Pfizer doses is effective against this Omicron variant. I did have a reaction to that booster, though. After I published last week's episode of the podcast, I was done. I had to lie down pretty much the rest of the day. I had chills. I'm pretty sure I had a fever. I didn't measure it. The biggest side effect for me, at least, was just body aches. My whole body hurt. And then by the 24-hour mark of when I got the booster injection, I felt fine. That was it. Bottom line, I am thrilled to be boosted. I think everyone should do it. Get the vaccine, get boosted, you guys, come on. Y'all know why you should do it. And if you're choosing not to, well, then wear a mask, please. I've also spent the last week and a half or so listening to Will Smith's autobiography. I've spoiled myself. I feel like George. Books on tape have ruined me, Jerry. I love audiobooks. And like I said last week, if they're narrated well, they're so awesome and they're just so entertaining. But I thought with Will Smith, that might be fun to listen to more than read. So I've been listening to it. I just finished it this morning, in fact. And it was definitely interesting. He has a lot of stories to share. Now, one of the stories I wanted to share because it's relevant to this podcast, he talks about his song, Getting Jiggy With It, which was, as a lot of you out there would know, was a huge hit. And he talks about how he really knew he made it when Getting Jiggy With It made it into a Seinfeld episode. So I think it's safe to assume all of us who are fans of Seinfeld know that it's Joe Mayo's party, and Jerry a couple of times makes reference to how he was the DJ at the party previous to the one that they were going to, and how he got jiggy with it, and how I was ready to get jiggy with it when he didn't get that job at Joe Mayo's party in that episode. So Will Smith makes reference to how jiggy with it was in a Seinfeld episode, but it's so inaccurate. I can't even believe it made it to the final edit of the book. I'm like, who is fact checking this? Obviously not a Seinfeld fan. This is what Will Smith says happened in some mystery Seinfeld episode that I'm like, well, either this didn't air or only Will Smith saw it, because none of us know what you're talking about. He says, so Jerry is trying to get together with the woman and she's not interested. Finally, she says, Jerry, what do you want from me? And he says, I'm trying to get jiggy with you. Huh? Like, what? I can't believe that made it to the final edit of this book. I'm going, that is so not what Jerry says. It's not in an argument with the woman. It's purely about him being a DJ at a party and saying, I got jiggy with it, or I was ready to get jiggy with it. In this day and age, I was amazed that Will Smith got that story so wrong. And with such conviction, he narrates that part in the book, reveling in the fact that, wow, I really made it. I mean, my song and my lyrics are making it into the top shows at the time. And I think there were a couple of other references he made about sports announcers using, he got jiggy with it, like during a play or something. Anyway, the Seinfeld reference was totally wrong in Will Smith's book. And just as a Seinfeld fan and purist, I was pretty annoyed with that. Not so much with Will. Maybe he just wrote that because he remembered it wrong. But whoever the hell edited and published that book, like, guys, do your research. We Seinfeld nerds will know it's not right. Okay, so with that, let's get into this episode. The synopsis for the Pez Dispenser from my coffee table book is as follows. Jerry's Pez Dispenser makes Elaine laugh during a piano recital by George's new girlfriend, Noelle. George wins the upper hand in his faltering relationship with her after performing a preemptive breakup. A drug intervention Jerry hosts for a friend is crashed by Kramer's new friends in the Polar Bear Club. Kramer tries unsuccessfully to sell Calvin Klein on his idea for a cologne that smells like the beach. This episode is written by Larry David. All right, so we start out in Jerry's apartment. The bathroom door's closed. George is kind of outside the bathroom talking to Jerry, just gushing about his new girlfriend. She's a pianist. She's brilliant. Oh, we did the crossword puzzle in bed. That's the most fun I've ever had in my whole life. He is so excited about this new girlfriend. Jerry comes out and says, "Oh, were you talking? I couldn't hear anything. I was telling you about Noelle." "Oh, right. The one who plays bongos." I love that moment with, so side-splittingly funny. And then Jerry says, "Well, what were you saying?" "I'm not going to repeat the whole thing." "No, I know. Everything's going good." "No, everything's not going good. I have no upper hand. I have no hand. She has all the power." George mentions that Noelle has a recital and then says, "Hey, you and Elaine should go and we could go out after and she'll see me with my friends and maybe I can get some hand that way." I like Jerry when he says, "Yeah, that sounds like something." Kramer enters. He wants Jerry and George to smell his arm. George doesn't want to, but Jerry says, "Oh, that smells good. What is that?" "It's the beach." "You went to the beach? It's freezing." "No, I just joined the Polar Bear Club." Then Kramer busts out a Pez dispenser. Jerry gets super excited. "Yeah, I bought it at the flea market." George doesn't know what happens at a flea market. He thinks they have fleas there. They call him out on that. Kramer gives Jerry the dispenser and he's really excited. Next, we are at Noelle's recital. George, Jerry, and Elaine are sitting in the audience, and Elaine is saying, "Oh, she can't believe how people can do this. It has to be so nerve-wracking." "How do you think they warm up?" Jerry says there's a piano backstage. He says it really confidently. "No, we would have heard it." Then he retorts, well, what do you think? They just crack their knuckles? George, you can tell he's already on edge. I mean, we already know that George doesn't have any power in this relationship, and he's nervous for her, I think. And so he instructs them when to applaud, not the first pause. It's not over yet. He's just tense and on edge. Noelle enters and bows, and she starts playing. Jerry, his snack for the recital apparently is his Pez, and he just quietly puts this Tweety Bird Pez dispenser on Elaine's leg, and she loses it. It just makes her laugh. Just looking at a Pez dispenser on her leg was too much for her, so she has to leave. She's laughing so hard, and the laugh just gets louder and louder as she's exiting the auditorium. And the shot goes back and forth to Noelle as she's hearing this. You can tell Elaine's getting shushed. I mean, it's a bad scene, so Elaine has to escape. The purpose of this scene, it's the scene that launches the entire conflict of the episode. Elaine is interrupting Noelle's performance by laughing so loud. And my take, okay, I love this scene because it puts on display one of Julia Louis-Dreyfus's biggest strengths as an actress, and that's her laugh acting. It is not easy to laugh convincingly on cue. It's just not. I mean, in fact, Jerry and Kramer try and do this in season 4 in the pilot episode. Jerry is telling Kramer, "You can't be on the show. You're not an actor." "Well, neither are you." So then they try and act like they are laughing at what the other person said, and it's not great. And George walks in and says, "Why are you two pretending to be laughing?" It's not an easy thing to do as an actor. Laughing like this, where it's like you can't catch your breath, that kind of laughing, it is not easy. And I'm also going off of what they say in the commentary, not to jump ahead, but Jerry and Larry do the commentary for this episode, and they mention, like, this is not easy to do. Like, no actor loves these kinds of scenes unless they're really good at laughing. Like, another actor that comes to mind for me, Steve Carell. He is fantastic. I was trying to think of examples of bad laugh acting, and the one that really stands out to me is from Gilmore Girls. If you guys have listened before, you know I'm a big fan of Gilmore Girls. So it actually kind of pains me to say this because I'm going to talk about Lauren Graham, who plays Lorelai Gilmore, the main character in the show. I love her, and I love her as an actress. I think she's incredibly talented, but there is an episode where her character Lorelai has to laugh really hard, almost similar to how Elaine laughs, where it's like she can't even catch her breath. It's just this out of control cackling laugh. And for those of you out there who know Gilmore Girls, you'll know what I'm talking about. But really quick, it's the episode right before Rory goes to Yale. She's at her parents' house. They're watching ballroom dancing. Lorelai's jet lagged. And so the reason she laughs so hard is because she's jet lagged and so tired. There's this moment where she's talking to her mother and she starts laughing super hard. And it's uncomfortable. She's trying so hard, I can tell. And then as if that's not bad enough, Alexis Bledel joins in when she comes into the scene and says, "What are you laughing at?" And then she kind of catches the laughter. And so they're both doing this really bad laugh acting performance. It's very bad. So if you want to see an example of what I think is very bad laugh acting, the episode right before Rory goes to Yale, and it's a cringy laugh acting performance. So that's why I have such an appreciation for actors who can do it so well. And I've always loved the way in this particular scene, there's a lot of great laughing acting scenes from JLD, but this scene in particular, I've always loved the way she laughs in this scene. And the moment where she looks at the Pez and then up at Noelle, you can see in her eyes that she's in this sort of amused panic. Her eyes get big. She knows what's about to happen. She's going to laugh. I love that pause right before she lets that first laugh out. I love the look on her face. She's very like, oh God, oh man, this isn't going to be good. And we have all been there. I think 99% of us have been there. It's a situation where you should not laugh, but forget about it. It's going to make you laugh even harder because you're not supposed to laugh. All right, so I want to do a little laugh breakdown, if I may. Again, I love the way it starts after she does her little panicked look towards Noelle going, oh God, this is not going to be good. The burst of air she was holding in with that little shriek that forces her to put her hand over her mouth. And then that first intake of breath comes in and that loud laugh gasp that the man behind her shushes her. But that just exacerbates the force of the laughter. So she makes the decision to walk out and she tries to apologize, but it just comes out as like a laughing shriek again. And then as she's making her way through the crowd, she's in full that staccato laugh rhythm, that ah, 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 ah. Sorry, I probably shouldn't do an impression of it. Punctuated by the loud gasps of breath. And then the moment where the camera's not even on her anymore, she's made her way up the aisle and past the camera, and we see the shot of Jerry and George, who George is quietly panicking, of course. The sound of her laughing has reached that point where it's almost like the laugh has a life of its own and she can't keep up with it. I want to know how many takes did they do of that, because that can't be easy as well. Beyond it being hard to make those kinds of laughs convincing as an actor, just physically, it would take a lot out of you, I would think, get a headache from doing that. But anyway, that's the breakdown of the laugh, and I think it is done perfectly. Next, we see Elaine outside of the venue, and she's exiting the building, still laughing really hard. This man comes up to her and says, "Something I said." She looks at him and doesn't recognize him, and he says, I'm John, Malika. Oh, and then she recognizes, oh, yes, how you doing? She tells him what she's doing there. She's there with Jerry, and then he put a Pez dispenser, and I just started laughing. And he says, whoa, Malika says, well, I heard you guys broke up. Oh, we did. We were just hanging out. Well, he takes that opportunity to say, you really look great. Ugh, a little creepy. We cut back to George just glaring at Jerry. And the Pez dispenser is on Elaine's chair at this point. Just a really funny shot of Jerry, Pez, and then George. We cut back and Elaine asks about Richie Appel. And he says, oh, he just got back from LA. He's really messed up on drugs. Elaine suggests an intervention and explains what it is. Oh, I don't think he'd listen to anybody except Jerry. Jerry would have to be involved. He really respects Jerry. Then we cut back to Jerry clapping with the Pez dispenser in his hands. The purpose of this scene, really to introduce the other storyline of the episode, the intervention with Richie Appel. My take, it's fine. It's just a really expositional scene, but I'm not mad at it. It's not as smooth as they've been in the past, but it's also not offensive to me. I love that Elaine comes out laughing and staggering, laughing from her amusement. A great way to continue what just happened in the auditorium into this next scene. And the delivery of that line, Jerry would have to be involved. He really respects Jerry. Just the dramatic reading of that is such a great juxtaposition to that cut to Jerry clapping the Tweety Bird Pez Dispenser with his finger. It's just, I like that. I thought that was a really good choice. Like, this is the guy who can help Richie Appel. Like, I just thought that was really funny. All right, next, we are outside of Noelle's dressing room. Elaine is apologizing. George is livid and blames Jerry. Jerry says, well, I didn't know she would laugh. It was just an impulse. Elaine keeps apologizing while laughing and that she'll tell Noelle. I'll just tell her it was me. George says, no, don't do that. If my friends are jerks, then I'm a jerk. And then Elaine remembers, she tells Jerry, remind me to tell you about something later. Well, what about? Hey, we're discussing something here. Jerry says, well, now I'm distracted. What are you, a baby? All right, fine, tell him. So she starts telling Jerry about what happened with John Malika, Richie, the intervention. George is very impatient. Can we cut to the chase? Cut to the chase? Who are you, Joe Hollywood? I would lose that. Lose that? What is that? That's not a Hollywood expression. Yes, it is. Anyway, of course, poor Elaine always has to just corral the madness. Richie is messed up and that Jerry needs to be involved in this intervention. And Jerry's like, I'm not sure. We got to talk about this. George says, all right, I'm going in. Noelle opens the door and you can tell right away she's not happy. Noelle is played by Elizabeth Moorhead, and she doesn't have too many recognizable credits on her IMDb. She guest starred quite a bit in the 90s and several shows. I'm not a big fan of her performance, to be honest, and I've always thought if they would have cast a more dynamic actress, this could have been a more interesting character. Maybe that was just the way she was directed, and so I shouldn't, fault the actress for that, but it just didn't work for me. And she's not terrible, but just very, very bland. Another actress could have just made Noelle a little bit more three-dimensional, I think. So George introduces Jerry and Elaine. They compliment her. You play a hell of a piano. Was really moved. But then right away she brings it up. But didn't you hear that person laughing? I couldn't play. I was humiliated. Oh, I'm sure it wasn't at you. Then what was she laughing at? Elaine defends the laugher because, I don't know, maybe someone put something stupid on her leg. Yes, but even if that happened, Jerry said, she's still the one who laughed. I'll never forget that laugh as long as I live. Noelle goes into the bathroom and Elaine just feels so bad. I'm sure she'd apologize if she could. Maybe someone's holding her back. And she and George have this slapping little fight. And Noelle exits the bathroom and George says, all right, let's go. Let's get something to eat. Noelle says she doesn't feel like it. Jerry and Elaine sense they should probably get out of there and they leave. And Jerry gets confirmation. How do you warm up? I just crack my knuckles. Elaine loves that validation. After they exit, George says, come on. I said I don't feel like it. There's her upper hand. We see Noelle's hand in all its glory there. George relents. Okay, I'll call you. We'll talk on the phone. We'll have a telephone communique. Fine, good. We're okay. We're fine. Okie dokie. So the purpose of this scene, well, we see the consequence of Elaine laughing during Noelle's recital and a full display of how George has no hand. My take, this scene is really dense with a lot of comedy and very Seinfeldian comedy. I love that Elaine is still laughing even when she's trying to apologize. It's a great choice by JLD. I mean, even if Elaine is really sorry, it doesn't come across very genuine because she's still laughing as she's apologizing. Oh, I love the slapping fight between George and Elaine. It's just giving the audience more insight into this sibling relationship that George and Elaine have. The pacing is really great. And also the coverage of George's original dilemma that is from the opening scene about how he has no power. After Jerry and Elaine exit, we see her snap at George and how he just cowers like a puppy who's been kicked. He's just totally deflated. And that little run at the end is fantastic by Jason Alexander. Okay, yeah, no, all right. It's so good, so well played. All right, the next scene, Jerry and Elaine are at Monk's, and this is very expositional just to talk about how Kramer may be responsible for Richie getting into drugs because Kramer told Richie to pour Gatorade after a big championship softball game for the comedy club, ended up killing the comedy club owner, and Richie was never the same. What about Kramer? Kramer's the same. I don't really need to comment on this. It was just a very short scene just to get more information about the intervention storyline. All right, so the next scene, we're at Jerry's apartment. Jerry's on the phone with John Malika. He's sort of trying to get out of the intervention. Well, at least he's trying to get out of hosting it at his place. And he finally agrees, gets off the phone, tells Kramer what they're doing. And Kramer says, "Can I get in on that? It's not a poker game." "Well, is Elaine going?" "Well, I knew him as well as Elaine, but she's invited. I'm just afraid you'll be interfering while we're intervening." George buzzes. Kramer keeps smelling his arm. He tells Jerry, "I'm thinking about making a cologne that smells like the beach." Jerry responds, "A cologne that smells like the beach. I can't believe I'm saying this, but that's not a bad idea. Why don't you call Steve DeGiff at Calvin Klein in the marketing department?" George enters. Just not a good vibe coming off of him. "It's over," he says. "It's definitely over." "She broke up with you?" "Nah, but I can tell she's going to." Talks about how he had made a list of things to talk about. It was very awkward. He got downgraded to lunch. He has no power. And Kramer just nonchalantly says, "Break up with her." "What? You break up with her? See, that reverses everything." As George thinks about this is an incredible idea. This is absolutely brilliant. So we cut immediately to George saying at Monk's with Noelle, "I am breaking up with you." Noelle definitely seems surprised. "I thought everything was fine." George is almost giddy with how surprised she is. "You didn't see it coming, did you?" "Didn't we have fun doing the crossword puzzle?" He's just kind of riding high on this preemptive breakup and how successful it is. And right away, you can see the reversal of the upper hand happening as this conversation's going. "Well, what do you want? I know I can make you happy. When you play the piano, do you think about me?" "Well, see, this is what I'm talking about." "Oh, okay, I'll think about you." "All the time?" "All the time? You see, okay, all the time." George says, "It's not so hard." She actually reminds me a little bit of Susan in this scene. Noelle, in fact, is kind of Susan light for me. Just kind of in the mannerisms. Maybe it's the voice. But in this particular scene, I don't like the performance here by Elizabeth Moorhead. I just feel like it could have been better with a stronger actress. I'm sorry, Elizabeth Moorhead. I'm not being very kind to you here. But again, if you were being directed to be like that, then that's on them. But there's something about the way she delivers the line all the time. It's not my favorite. All right, next we're in Calvin Klein. Kramer is talking to Steve DeGiff, sticking his arm in his face, and then pitches his idea. "I want to capture the essence of that smell. That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. You want to make cologne that smells like dead fish and seaweed?" He says it's an objectionable and offensive odor. That's why people take showers when they come home from the beach. Next, we are at the intervention scene. John Malika has a bloody nose and has 2 pieces of tissue just hanging out of his nostrils. You can tell Elaine's grossed out. You have to work like that. Yeah, nobody minds. There's a guy there. He's pissed. There's no ice. Can't drink warm pop. I'm with him. Yuck. Gross. Can't drink warm pop. Sorry, soda. Whatever you say, wherever you're from. Then they're all trying to discuss the plan. Well, we all have to talk. Jerry doesn't want to talk, but that's not the point. Oh, gosh. Then Kramer enters. Is this the interference? He can't stay. It's only close friends. Hey, I'm a friend. I told him to pour the Gatorade over Marty Benson's head. Then his polar bear buddies come in. You having a party here? Oh, no, we're having an intervention. An intervention? Who's intervening? His friend who's on drugs. And then he tells, oh, yeah, we've done that with the polar bears. What is it, too cold for you? Then they hear the buzzer. They think it's Richie. They all want to hide. It's not a surprise party, but it's just George. And then we see this little kind of conversation off to the side with John and Elaine. John's trying to ask Elaine out. You won't go out with me because I'm a bartender, right? And she says, I don't really think this is appropriate right now, which it isn't. Is it because I have a tissue in my nose? You're getting warm. George and Noelle enter. And George forgot that there was an intervention going on, says, oh, maybe we should leave. But then Noelle sees Elaine, so she goes and sits down on the couch. Jerry notices George has a very different demeanor. You're looking well. A man with no hand is not a man. George has so much hand, he's coming out of his gloves. The guy from the Polar Bear Club is talking to Elaine on the couch. He's in between Elaine and Noelle. And he does this bit about how male kangaroos have pouch envy. I have things to carry too. Maybe a pocket? And Elaine starts laughing. Noelle slowly recognizes that laugh. And as soon as Elaine figures out Noelle has figured it out, she tries to cough to cover it up. That's the laugh. You're the one. Oh, no. It was an accident. And she blames Jerry. Jerry put a Pez dispenser on my leg. Noelle yells at Jerry about doing that. And then, George, you lied to me, George. And she leaves. Where are you going? I am breaking up with you. You can't break up with me. I have hand. And you're gonna need it. Ba-dum-bum-tsh. Then Richie enters. So what's going on? Purpose of this scene? Well, it's the culmination of all the storylines, all the dovetailing happening. The intervention, Noelle finds out it was Elaine who laughed and breaks up with George. My take, it's another scene like just packed with comedy, really great pacing, bringing all the storylines together. I think it's done really well. The bloody nose thing is so random with John Malika, but as I'm watching it, especially now as I'm watching it as an older woman, it's such a great device to show how so often like mediocre dudes just have all this confidence for some reason. The guy has tissues hanging out of his nostrils, and yet he's confronting Elaine about being shallow, about going out with him, and doing it right before an intervention. I just think this is such a great display of men don't give a shit sometimes. And it's usually the really mediocre ones who don't have a lot to offer. I don't care if I have tissues hanging out of my nose. She should want to go out with me. And I love her response with you're getting warm. I've always loved that little polar bear man. The older man who was doing that kangaroo bit with Elaine. He's so adorable. At least give me a pocket. I love that delivery. And once again, the laugh is fantastic. And that slow realization by Noelle is perfect. And the coughing to cover it up. I love that choice also. Jason Alexander, after Noelle says, you lied to me, George, you lied to me, is hilarious. I love the scrambling and finally ending with, what did I do? And the scene ending with the innuendo of, and you're gonna need it. It's very corny, but whatever. It's almost like you have to do it when you're talking about hand, I guess. And then the last scene of the episode, it's just kind of Jerry at his apartment recapping to George what happened at the intervention. It's a little bit of a long rambling story about how this Pez dispenser reminded Richie about his dad and how he got in a car accident because his dad was trying to load a Pez dispenser while driving, blah, blah, blah. But he checked into rehab. Doing great on the rehab. He's hooked on Pez. George is trying to do a crossword puzzle by himself, and he can't come up with a 3-letter word for candy. Ba-dum-bum-tsh, another corny moment. I am going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Funerals. Firing someone. Seeing an old lady fall. Performing an autopsy. What do all of these have in common? That's right. They are all places or situations where a fit of laughter would be a disaster. But as we all know, sometimes you can't help it. Once the giggles start, it's near impossible to make them stop. That's why you need Blues Cues, a new app that will remind you of the darkest, most depressing events around the world, guaranteed to halt any and all laughing episodes. Just try laughing during that pap smear after a Blues Cues notification about Romanian orphans who have never been hugged. Uh-oh. You feel some chuckles bubbling up after your best friend told you she lost her job. Good thing your Blues Clues app just reminded you that Prince is dead. If orphans or Prince aren't your cues for instant melancholy, don't worry. When you download the app, Blues Clues will ask you a series of questions to perfectly curate the depressing triggers for your life experience. We have over 400,000 surefire distractions of misery, so you never have to worry about laughing at the wrong time again. Just go to bluescues.no.lol to download the app, and then rest easy with the knowledge that feeling like shit in an instant is at your fingertips. Blues Cues. Cue the blues whenever you choose. And we're back. The extras for this episode, there was an inside look, and the only thing I thought that was interesting from the inside look was how Pez, after this episode aired, Pez apparently the next week was the top candy in the country or something. So Jason Alexander mentions like that was one of the first times I was like, wow, people are watching our show and we sort of have an impact on culture and trends and stuff like that. So it was one of the first times that because something was mentioned on the show, it became very popular in the culture. The commentary, as I mentioned earlier, was done by Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David. And this whole idea of Elaine laughing during the recital, it was inspired by pretty much the same incident for Larry. And he was at a recital of some sort. A friend put a Pez dispenser on his leg and he couldn't leave like Elaine did. And he was in the front row and he had to bite his tongue the whole time because it just struck him as so amusing. And the commentary, I wish there was more, but it's really, when it's Jerry and Larry, a lot of it is just them laughing really hard at their work, really. All right, let's move on to Contributor Corner. Greg sent in some thoughts and he had this to say. The entire opening scene feels like a show Jerry and George would have written as their pilot for NBC. There's a lot of stupid dialogue, and there is no way someone doesn't know what a flea market is. The writing in this whole Elaine-less setup scene feels like a bunch of puns thrown together to give Jerry a chance at some punchlines. Okay. I didn't have that reaction to the opening scene. It seemed very neutral to me, but I appreciate what you said, Greg. Next, Greg says, the next scene, however, is perfection, as Jerry makes Elaine laugh so hard with such a simple action of putting a Tweety Pez dispenser on her leg. Her laugh is honestly one of my favorite moments in the entire series. Something so dumb and innocent would really make someone laugh if they were in the right mood, and JLD delivers it like the Emmy-winning powerhouse that she is. From the initial snickering and trying to stifle it to the raucous exit from the room, she is perfect. No matter how many times I've seen it, I laugh every time. All right, so your first comment, Greg, about the opening scene, I wasn't with you, but this one, 100% with you. Yes, I talked about it earlier in the episode, but I love everything about this laugh performance. Yeah, the build up to it, the surrendering to it, which she just can't help it, to how out of control it gets at the end. It's great. Greg goes on to say, I like how Elaine wants to apologize and George forces her to lie and how that leads to a little smack fight between the two. I always love an Elaine and George confrontation. Absolutely, Greg. There are very few things on this show better than when Elaine and George fight, either verbally or physically. It's always entertaining. Next, Greg says, the rest of the episode is about George's relationship, the intervention, and Kramer's beach cologne idea. And while that is all funny, I would have liked more Elaine. She should have been in the scene where the guys are discussing the preemptive breakup. She would have called George out on it for sure. That's a good point. I don't have a scene swap idea here for Elaine because I don't know. I think I just am so satisfied with her laugh acting in that scene. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely not enough Elaine. Greg's next comment, the intervention scene is basically just a setup for Noelle to hear Elaine's laugh. There's a lot of quick comments from random guests, none of which is funny. I do like when John is trying to ask Elaine out and he says, "Is it because I have the tissues in my nose?" And she responds, "You're getting warm." Definitely a highlight of that scene. You're right, Greg. Yeah, it is a setup. I mean, even when during the commentary, when that scene starts where Elaine is walking out laughing and runs into John, John's line is, "What are you doing out here?" In the commentary, Larry David literally says, "She's out there to start the next storyline." That's really the whole reason for this scene. So yeah, I think it's a little bit, again, to take something like an intervention, to have this whole setup, it's a bit involved to have this whole scene just for the climax, I guess, of Noelle hearing Elaine laughing. Again, I don't think it's bad. I actually kind of like the little random quick comments because I think it's very realistic. I think when you have a bunch of people at your house who maybe you don't really know very well, this is a very forced situation. There's going to be some awkwardness. There's going to be little bits and pieces of just random people saying things. So actually, there's a part of that I really appreciate because it doesn't seem so, I guess, perfectly orchestrated, because those events are never perfectly orchestrated. So the guy getting mad about no ice, I enjoy that every time. It always makes me laugh. I can't drink this. It's warm. He's so mad. So I have an appreciation for that because I think what sets Seinfeld apart so many times from other sitcoms at the time is they allow for these kind of one-off things to happen in scenes where I think in any other show, it's like, well, that really has no point. We have to just make it seem like everything's flowing perfectly. So I appreciated that. And finally, Greg says, "I think this episode all around is just okay. The Elaine laughing during the recital was the best part, and George's relationship was all this episode needed. The beach cologne and intervention stuff was not funny at all. It was too much subplot and felt very choppy." I can definitely see that. I've always thought the intervention portion was a little bit odd. And look, they needed to give Kramer a storyline. And I guess because we all know that the beach cologne thing continues in further episodes, I guess I forgive it because it's like this is kind of the initial setup for his journey about, this whole, not only the cologne, but his modeling for Calvin Klein and everything. So, they needed to give Kramer something. So I don't mind it. But I'll get more into that with my final comments. Thanks so much, Greg. You always add so much great stuff to every episode of Hot and Heavy. I really appreciate it. And if you would like to become a contributor to the show, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. And you could be a future contributor to the show. My favorite Elaine moment, well, it's all the laughing, no surprise. But the bonus moment for me is the off-camera, out-of-control cackling that happens. I might cut this out, but it's like, like it's just, it makes me laugh every time. Oh, it's so great. And who doesn't love a really good, just laughing fit? I mean, there's something cleansing about it. I just had one the other night. And like Greg says, sometimes you're in the mood, something will strike you super funny. That's not even necessarily very funny, but it just happens to be the perfect storm of the mood you're in, maybe the way you saw it, the way you heard it, and you can't help but laugh. And so I had that the other night with the way my husband reacted to something our son did, and I couldn't breathe. And it just, once you do catch your breath and you kind of recover from it, it's very cleansing. That's the best way I can put it. Laughter is the best medicine. Have you ever heard that? All right, my final notes. I think this is a very good episode. After the subway episode last week, which I thought strayed a bit too far from, finding that Seinfeldian quality to the episode, it's nice to have this more grounded episode where the comedy is based on finding the funny in reality. And I think a lot of these situations are grounded in reality. I mean, who hasn't been in a situation where they couldn't control their laughter at the most inappropriate moment? I think that's very common. And then with George's storyline, having power in a relationship, I mean, that's a very relatable struggle for some people. In fact, shameless plug, but it's my podcast, so I'm going to do it. It's one of the cornerstones of what I write about in my blog. It's something I've struggled with, sort of power imbalance in my marriage. And a lot of that's just, well, I shouldn't even say a lot of it. Most of it is self-inflicted. And it's something that I'm always struggling with since we're conditioned to believe money and power to be synonymous. And the fact that I've never been the breadwinner in my family. I've gone up and down with how much I'm contributing with our income and whatnot. There's so many things that are very complicated. So my blog, impressionista.me, I'll add a link in the show notes. It really tackles a lot of that. And I've gotten such great reaction and had some really great conversations with friends after I've written some of my posts, because this isn't something that's uncommon. Not only within marriage, I think every relationship, whether it's friendships or work relationships, I mean, having power, having the upper hand, as they call it, or the hand, it's one of those things. That's what Seinfeld does so well. It finds comedy in something like having power over, whoever you're dating. It finds comedy in that. And I think they do it really well in this episode. Now, an intervention may not be as relatable to the masses, but I think the fact that they found a way to, make it a funny scenario without making fun of the actual practice of an intervention or making fun of addiction itself, I think that's pretty remarkable. They don't punch down to Richie at all. They don't make him out to be some lowlife or anything. They're just never making fun of him. And I love that. So yeah, it's tricky. You want an intervention to be funny, but I think Larry David brilliantly makes the comedy around the intervention more about the people running it versus what or who it's actually for. So great job with that. And there's so much packed in this episode, but it doesn't feel overloaded at all, like there's too much going on. I think it's all done really well in the perfect proportions. And it's a very classic Larry David episode. All of this feels so Larry David. And I guess I'm saying that too because the new season of Curb is on right now. So every Sunday I'm watching new Larry David content. I'm really hyper aware now when I watch these Seinfeld episodes, and especially if they're written by Larry David, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, this screams Larry David. While back when I was watching these originally, or even watching them before I got into Curb Your Enthusiasm, it was just like, well, this is just a Seinfeld episode. And yeah, it's funny because it's Seinfeld, but now I'm able to really kind of pick out those nuances when it's a Larry David episode. And I love that. I think he has one of the most brilliant comedic minds of this generation. And I think that's all I can say about the Pez Dispenser. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.